You know that feeling when you scroll through endless TV listings, see a 65-inch screen that looks like a window into another world, click Add to Cart, and then the first thing you notice is how the picture looks flat and dim in your living room? I've been there more than once, and it's why I'm doing this deep dive before anyone throws their money at a new big screen TV. Link is in the description if you want to check the product details on Amazon. I want to make sure you don't end up with a gorgeous box that feels like a disappointment when the power button finally gets pressed. First off, let's talk about the kind of TV you're actually buying. The Samsung 65-inch Neo QLED belongs to the premium mid-range camp. It's not the absolute flagship, but it does bring a lot of the high-end tech that used to be exclusive to the top-tier models. That means mini LED backlighting, a quantum processor that does 4K upscaling, and a suite of audio tricks like Dolby Atmos and object tracking sound. Those buzzwords sound great, but the question is how they translate into the everyday moments you care about: movie nights with the family, weekend sports binges, or an after-work gaming session. Picture quality is where the Neo QLED really tries to separate itself from the sea of flat panel options. The mini LED matrix creates a lot more dimming zones than a traditional edge-lit LED, so the TV can boost brightness without blowing out the highlights. In a bright living room that gets a lot of daylight, this is a practical win. You can actually see HDR highlights in a sunny window without squinting. I tested a few HDR clips from a recent blockbuster, and the highlights on explosions and sunlight stayed punchy, while the shadows retained decent detail. The Quantum HDR 24x processing does a decent job of pulling out texture from standard 1080p sources, which is handy if you still watch a lot of cable or older Blu-ray discs. That said, the black levels aren't quite on par with OLED. Because it's still an LED panel, there's a bit of blooming around bright objects on dark backgrounds. If you sit in a near-dark room and watch a sci-fi film with a lot of star fields, you'll notice a thin halo around the stars. It's not a deal-breaker for most viewers, but it's something to keep in mind if you're a true cinephile chasing perfect blacks. Moving to motion handling, Samsung's Motion Xcelerator Turbo Plus is built to keep fast-moving scenes smooth, which is especially noticeable in sports and gaming. I ran a couple of fast-action football games and a Hypes racing title, and the motion interpolation stayed subtle. The image didn't look like a soap opera, but there was less judder than I've seen on older 4K sets. For gamers who use a console that can push 120 Hz, the TV does support a 120 Hz input, but the HDMI ports are a mix of 2.1 and 2.0. If you need two HDMI 2.1 connections, for a console and a next-gen PC, you'll have to check the exact port layout. The spec sheet says one port is full 2.1, the rest are 2.0, so you might end up swapping cables depending on what you're using. Audio is another area where Samsung tries to stand out. The built-in speakers are tuned for Dolby Atmos and object tracking sound, meaning they attempt to place sounds in a three-dimensional space without an external soundbar. In a normal-sized living room, the dialogue was clear and the directional effects in a thriller felt convincing. However, the overall SPL, sound pressure level, is still limited by the thin panel design, so deep bass moments felt more like a whoosh than a rumble. If you're looking for a full home theater experience, you'll probably still want a dedicated sound system, but the built-in audio is certainly better than a plain stereo TV set. Smart features are where the daily usability comes into play. The TV runs Samsung's Tizen platform, which feels snappy enough for everyday streaming. You get a built-in Alexa, so you can control the TV with voice commands, dim the lights, or ask for the weather without reaching for a remote. The interface groups your favorite apps on the home screen, and the smart calibration uses the built-in sensor to tweak brightness and color based on the room's lighting. In practice, the calibration was subtle. It didn't suddenly make the picture look neon, but it did keep the whites from looking washed out after sunset. One practical tip: the TV's One Connect box isn't required for this model, so you can keep all your cables behind the TV without an extra hub, which simplifies a clean installation. Now, who should actually consider spending the premium price on this 65-inch Neo QLED? If you have a bright or moderately lit room and you watch a mix of HDR movies, sports, and console gaming. The combination of high brightness, solid upscaling, and decent motion handling gives you a well-rounded experience. It's also a good fit if you already have a Samsung ecosystem, the Alexa integration, SmartThings connectivity, and the ability to